Hi everyone, I'm back with another Thursday Thoughts. Today's Thursday Thoughts is, I think, a topic that every chronically ill person will enjoy because it's something that we all are going to go through at some point during our chronic illness. And that is, how do we manage somebody else's illness? And this is something that no one tells you. When you become chronically ill, no one tells you someone else is going to get sick. I mean, someone else is bound to get sick because you're sick for so long. Multiple people are going to get sick during your illness. So how do you handle that? So these are just a few quick tips. I didn't do like a Google search or anything for this because these are things that I've actually implemented myself to cope with another person's illness. And I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm speaking from experience, especially because this is so fresh in my life. So I felt like just my own personal advice would probably be better than doing a Google search and going through all of these points. So what do you do when somebody else becomes sick? Some of you know that last year my nephew was diagnosed with leukemia. And let me tell you, when you get the news, as a sick person, you feel no comfort whatsoever. I didn't feel any comfort knowing that there was another person in the family that was sick. It was devastating, and it just adds illness upon illness. So it was a very, very stressful time, and being that he was still a toddler, he was 3 years old, it was just, how do you deal with it? So it was a complete shock in that moment. So give yourself some time to let it sink in. Your routine is going to go out the window for a few days, so let it be. Give yourself some time to deal with the news that you just got. Don't stress yourself out and say, okay, but I still have to do, my physical therapy. I still have to do because you're going to be in so much shock. Depending on how bad the illness is, you're going to be in a lot of shock, and it's going to be really tough to process. So give yourself some time. It may take a few days, it may take a few weeks, it may take a month or more, because it is really hard, and it just sometimes comes out of left field. So like I said, allow your routine to be flexible. Sorry, I'm dabbing myself here because our air conditioning is out up here, so I'm going to be a little bit shiny. Let your routine get a little bit flexible, but try to keep it as much. Don't force yourself to keep it, especially in that initial phase. But once you get past that initial phase of the news, then try to get back into your routine, but keep it flexible and keep it open, because there's going to be some changes depending on who gets sick. For me, it was my nephew, so he doesn't live with us. He lives, with my brother and his wife. And so it didn't really mess up my routine too much, but in those first days, in the first few weeks, it was hard because my parents, weren't coping well with it, and we all kind of had to readjust to the news. But I tried to stick to my routine and as much as I could, and I kept especially my eating schedule, because you don't want to skip meals. You're just going to end up feeling worse. As it is, being depressed or being upset kills my appetite. So I really had to make sure that I was still eating. So try to keep certain key parts of your routine in place. Don't neglect self-care. Do not neglect yourself because someone else is sick. Continue to do the things that soothe you, whether that's reading or going out for a walk. Try to continue to do those as much as possible. Like I said, after you get over the initial shock, try to keep doing all of those things that that you do enjoy. I know, and this leads me to my next point. Don't feel guilty. It is hard not to feel guilty because, especially with a child, with a child being sick, you do think to yourself, oh my God, I have so much to be grateful for, and I feel so horrible because he's sick now. And I kind of started seeing that in myself, and I was like, no, this is not my fault. It's nobody's fault. Unfortunately, What I tell people is illness does not discriminate. It does not discriminate by gender. It does not discriminate by age. It does not discriminate by race. Everybody gets sick. And it is unfortunate when a child gets an illness like that, but it's nobody's fault. These things happen to everyone. So don't feel guilty and don't blame yourself. When I saw my nephew the day before he was hospitalized, and he did not look well to me at all. He looked very sick. And the next day when I was told that they had been sent to the hospital, before we got the news, right away in my mind, I was like, I knew it. Leukemia was the first thing that popped in my mind. And it's like, I should have said something. I should have told them, but there's nothing that you can do. It wasn't until he was actually hospitalized and checked out that they determined it was leukemia. So this has nothing to do with you. A lot of times I think we internalize it and we say, oh, this is my fault, or there's something that I did, or I could have done something. I know other people in my family and my extended family, they've had siblings that have passed away, and they tell themselves, if only I had pushed him to go to the doctors, if only I had, and it's like, that person is responsible for their own health. Unfortunately, there's nothing that you could have done to save them. And that leads me to my next point. That person is responsible for their own illness. In the case of my nephew, it's his parents that are responsible for his care and for his illness. In the case of, my cousin that passed away several years ago, he was responsible for his own health and for his own illness. And unfortunately, he was not diligent with that, and he passed away. I'm not saying that it was his fault, but when you're symptomatic and you're not attending to that, there are consequences. I know this myself firsthand. I've done it myself in the past, and I do believe that my illness became so advanced because of self-neglect. And that's the one thing that I have sadly learned, is that person or their parents, if they're a minor, they are responsible for that illness. Unfortunately, there's nothing that you can do, and it is not it's not my responsibility to take care of him or to make sure that he's okay. That's his parents' responsibility. So it sounds harsh and it sounds kind of mean, but it's the truth, and that's the way that it works. If the person is an adult, it's 100% their responsibility. They are in charge of their doctor's appointments. They are in charge of their medications, their supplements. If they don't want to take them, there's nothing you can do to make them take them. And I've actually spoken with other patients with my illness or with a different illness, my parents, things like that. And unfortunately, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. It is ultimately their responsibility. And you just have to let that go, because it will eat away at you if you internalize that and say, if only I could have, or if only I, or I should tell them this. It's not your responsibility. So avoid stressful people during this time. There are going to be people that are going to say a lot of things regarding, the sick person, or they're going to say a lot of things about you. I had people start comparing me to, not to my nephew, but to other people that I know that are sick. I've had people in my family compare me and say, well, you're not that sick. You're not as sick as that person. Avoid these people. Avoid having conversations with these people, because you're talking apples and oranges. The illnesses may be different. It doesn't mean that they're any less lethal or that they are any less stressful or hard on your body. Do not engage in these types of conversations, especially comparing illness, or, this is not a competition. We're not competing to be who's the sickest. And to be honest, I've said it before, I would rather be the sick one than my nephew. I can handle my own illness. Someone else's is, believe it or not, harder to deal with. At least that's what I found. There is no comfort in having another sick person in the family. So avoid the negativity. get away from those people or just don't engage in conversations with them because, or there's also the criticism of, well, blaming so-and-so for that person's illness. And I have heard this, like I said, no one causes leukemia. No one causes any kind of disease. And I have heard people pointing the finger and blaming others. And, oh, that's why he got sick. And that's why he's like this. And it's like, no, it's nobody's fault. Avoid these negative people at all costs. Avoid dwelling on the illness. This is something that I have seen in the caregivers of the sick person. And, you dwell and you dwell and you dwell. It's even worse if you are already sick and you're dwelling on another person's illness. Do not do this to yourself. We dwell on our own illness enough. Don't dwell on somebody else's. Let it be. Accept it. It is hard to accept it, but acceptance is the key here. Accept it. Don't dwell on it. Again, my nephew has his caregivers, which are his parents. They're responsible for his care. They shouldn't dwell on the illness either because it will break you down. But as a sick person, you have your own illness to deal with. Do not dwell on another person's illness. It's just not healthy. And as I mentioned earlier, continue to do the things that you enjoy. Even though you feel guilty, and even though sometimes other people will make you feel guilty for it, you still have your own illness to deal with. You still have your own things that you're going through. You have to find some kind of joy in your day. You cannot allow these things to eat you up inside. So those are my tips. Those are the things that I've learned in dealing with, coping with my nephew's illness. It is very hard. He's actually doing a lot better now. He's everything is going as planned. So that is a big relief, but he still has a way to go until the end of his treatment, but we still have to take care of ourselves. We are chronically ill. Sometimes these other people will get better way before we ever do. So that's also another thing to keep in mind. You're still sick. You still have to take care of yourself. So that's my Thursday thoughts for today. Check out my past broadcasts that I did for Periscope, and check out my You Caring page. The link is always in the description. And if you have any suggestions for any other topics you'd like me to cover, let me know, and I'll check it out for you guys. So thank you for joining me today, and I will be back again very soon.